The door didn't appear. It remembered me. Buildings forget, foundations shift, paint flakes, and years settle into the corners like silt. But this wall had a seam where no seam should be, a thin brass spiral that pulsed like a sleeping eye, and when I pressed my palm to it, my name came back in a voice I've never had the courage to use out loud. Stay. My camera's timestamp jumped forward exactly 7 minutes. The fluorescent lights hummed a tone I felt in my teeth, and I knew, as clearly as the grit under my fingernails, that this wasn't the first time I had opened it. By the end of this, you'll understand why the embassy sealed my footage and why I still went back. It started as a routine restoration. I volunteer at the municipal archive on weekends. Boxes of brittle maps, ink ghosts of street names, a ledger someone cried into 80 years ago. There's comfort in old paper. It admits its damage. The basement smelled like wet coin and printer's ink. The brick along the east wall had been painted a bureaucrat's beige, the kind of color chosen to hide stains and memories. I was scraping the lower corner when the brush snagged on something smooth, metal under paint. At first I thought conduit. Then the brush bristles came away dusted gold. Brass. A line of it, curving, not like a pipe, but like a fingerprint enlarged until it was a path. I did what any underfunded, overcurious human does. I improvised. Metal ruler to feel under the paint, chalk dust along the brick to catch drafts, phone flashlight pressed low to the wall to show relief. The chalk climbed the curve as if someone exhaled behind it. When the air moves where there shouldn't be air, the body believes before the mind agrees. I checked the original building plans, blueprints so clean you could cut your thumb on the lines. No aperture, no service hatch. But tucked inside a tenant note from 1972, hum of choir at 2 a.m., a doodle of a spiral beside it. You know the kind of fear that's just excitement wearing a helmet? That's what I felt when the spiral warmed under my palm. It matched the whirls of my fingerprint, each ring aligning with something inside my skin. My phone's compass spun 360 degrees and then gave up. Stay, the wall whispered. It wasn't a command, it was a plea from a friend who doesn't know how to ask for help without apologizing. I took a breath. I pressed. The seam shivered and the paint cracked along the curl, flaking away to reveal a narrow brass inlay set into the brick. Beneath the hum, I heard the faintest click, like loosening a thought. I looked up into the security camera in the corner, the one that doesn't record so much as make people behave. I smiled at it, a reflex. If I don't come back, I tripped over a box, I said, to no one at all. The spiral unfurled. The wall sighed open, not outward or inward, but along an impossible plane that felt like my name spoken backwards. Beyond it, darkness, not empty, but waiting. I stepped forward because there wasn't a version of me that wouldn't. When my heel crossed the threshold, the door sealed behind me without a sound, like punctuation at the end of a sentence I hadn't finished writing. Okay, I whispered, because the walls here respected quiet. We're doing this. The corridor was longer than the building. You could feel it in the way your footsteps took a fraction of a second too long to come back as echoes. No dust, no cobwebs. The air was the temperature of concentration. Doors lined both sides, tall and handleless, each set with a word, not engraved so much as grown into the surface. Regret, mercy, doubt, resolve. Words we spend whole lives orbiting and naming as stars, not as locks. The door behind me had no word. When I turned, there was only a stretch of pale wall and the sensation of a page you've already read closing itself. Panic knocked at the base of my skull. I did the only thing control ever taught me, built a path back. From my bag, carpenter's twine, chalk, gaffer's tape. I tied the twine to my belt and ran it along the floor edge, marking every third meter with chalk arrows pointing toward where I came from. It was theater, comfort in visible systems, and also insurance, because some halls pretend to be straight when they're not. I tested the air near the doors, warmth, a faint pull like the tide drawn by breath. Regret breathed warmer when I thought about my mother's last voicemail I didn't return. Mercy cooled when I remembered the neighbor I forgave but never trusted again. The hall changed when I named things, or I changed. I'm still not sure which is more dangerous. There was a plaque at eye level between two doors, set with script that made the back of my neck prickle. I didn't recognize the letters, but they held themselves like language, the way math does when it's about to become a story. I raised my camera and took a photo just to capture the shape of it. In the screen, for a flicker, the characters rearranged into words I could read, but only in the photo. To my naked eye, they stayed stubbornly other. I should have left then. Then again, if I were the kind of person who left well enough alone, I'd have fewer stories and less faith. Something clicked. A breath, a shift, like a thought deciding to become a decision. I turned. The door labeled regret had softened around its edges, a pulse in its surface like the flutter under a wrist. It unlocked when I let myself think of the pendant I never bought the day I knew I was leaving him, the one I wanted as proof I could give myself something without asking. All right, I said to the door, because sometimes saying things out loud makes them ethical. We'll do this honestly. I pressed my palm to the word. It didn't feel like metal. It felt like memory, the exact weight of it. The door opened on a breath that shivered the chalk under my feet.
Regret wasn't punishment. It was curation. Shelves rose in quiet tiers, a small cathedral built from the spine up. Every object was familiar and also wrong. There was the box of seashells from a childhood beach trip, except the spiral was left-handed, not right. There was a sweatshirt I never bought from a college I never chose. There was a silver pendant with my initials, heavy and simple, and exactly what I would have picked on a day I stood in front of a window and didn't go in. I laughed. It sounded startled and fond, like I'd caught myself telling the truth by accident. "You thief," I told the room. "You archivist." I did what documentation demands. I photographed every shelf, every object. My camera shutters sounded too loud and then exactly right, like a ritual of notice. When I checked the gallery, my stomach went cold. My EXIF timestamps were in the future. Not a random glitch, a sequence. The photo I had just taken was marked 1603, and the next one, which I hadn't yet taken, was 1604. The archive was writing ahead of me, or I was catching up. On the spines of books, whose titles I refused to say aloud because owning a thing's name binds it, I kept seeing a sigil. A spiral, yes, but interlaced with a hexagonal handprint, like two species deciding on a handshake and inventing geometry to make it fair. I zoomed in on the photo, and only then noticed the overlap. In person, the shapes looked separate. In capture, they acknowledged one another. The pendant called to my skin the way a warm mug does after bad news. It was nothing, and it was everything. And if I left it there, it would become a story I told about how wise I was. If I took it, I'd have to live with the version of me who wanted. My own voice, recorded, came from the shelf behind me. "Don't take anything," it said, steady and tired in the way we get when we've said a thing too many times to ourselves to keep it from mattering. I spun. There was my camera. There was no recorder, and my hand was already closing around the chain. The pendant stung like snow. A note rang in the back of my teeth.
The shelves whispered the way trees do in wind, and I understood, without the right to call it understanding, that the room wasn't angry. It was mathematical. Inputs had outputs. Borrowing had a price. I slid the pendant into my pocket. "I'll bring it back," I said, "to the room, to myself, to the person who would have worn it years ago and become someone else." The word back tasted like copper. When I stepped into the hall again, my chalkline underfoot had become a printed inlay, as if I'd always walked here, as if the building had updated my route with bureaucratic precision. Edits announce themselves in small ways first. Change the color of a thread, watch the seam behave differently. I pulled out my phone to check the time. The lock screen photo, my 30th birthday, showed a cake with blue frosting, a joke from a friend who thinks I look good in cool colors. It was red now. Same lettering, same smudge of icing on my chin, different choice. I went back into regret and moved something that couldn't matter, a pebble from the beach box, from the left compartment to the right. When I reemerged, my call history had a single changed digit in a missed call I knew by heart. The voicemail transcription was the same. The number had a different grace note, and I had to sit down because it meant story, not event. It meant this place didn't just move objects. It moved causality's furniture 1 inch to the left and waited to see if anyone stubbed a toe. A new symbol flickered at the upper corner of my camera UI, a seal I didn't recognize but did understand. Formal, sober, a promise folded into a threat. It blinked and vanished, like a second conscience testing the volume of its voice. "Okay," I told the corridor, "we are going to be scientists about this. Hypothesis, test, consequence. Apologize." I ran a controlled trial, a small edit, trackable effect. I left a note on one shelf, "Replace the pendant tomorrow." I signed it with my initials and the time. I took 3 photos from 3 angles, documenting the note's existence like I was trying to convince a judge and myself. Then a voice spoke my name again, and it wasn't mine this time. It had the careful gentleness of someone trained not to frighten animals or children. It came from a door labeled Inquiry. I faced it the way you face a doctor's office, braced, polite, unwilling to be small. "I'm listening," I said, and my hand moved before my courage did. "Please be seated," said the room, without speaking. An empty chair faced a lens the size of my palm. No mirrors, no windows. The walls were the kind of gray that refuses to be a color, a neutrality so deliberate it counts as an opinion. Questions appeared in the air in clean serif subtitles. Not projected, not holographic, just there, like conscience. Only I could see them. My camera, when raised, recorded nothing but light. Q1. Are you aware of your location? I sat. My mouth tried to be clever. I ignored it. I reached for my sketchbook. Instead of words, I drew an outline of the building, marked the room we came in, shaded the corridor like a river, and circled the regret door. I put a question mark at the edges of the paper. The subtitles condensed into Acknowledged. Q2. State your intention. I drew a hand and a spiral interlaced. Under it, 3 shapes, a triangle, a circle, a square. Things that existed before speech but did not mind it. I shaded the spiral darker. The lens dilated. Partial, the air said. Q3. Prior human interface. The word prior made my throat go tight. I drew a stick figure, ridiculously simple. Then 3. On the 3rd, I drew a small crown because sometimes the truth has to arrive through humor to be bearable. The subtitles changed tone without changing font. Recorded. The questions knew too much, or I knew too little. The phrase containment covenant appeared unasked, as if the room were reminding itself. I sketched the words small and then crossed them out because I am not a covenant person. I am a consent person. The lens shrank and expanded, like a breath taken and held. Final, are you ready to accept custodianship? Custodian. The word from the changed building log. I stared at the chairback, whose scuffs made constellations. The part of me that wants to fix things said yes. The part that remembers the cost of yes said ask the price. I drew a lock with 3 keyholes. I drew 3 hands, each different, each reaching. I drew a ledger with entries everyone could read. The subtitles hesitated, if words can. Then around me, I heard the soft mechanical hush of doors unlocking. Not all of them, enough to make the corridor feel like it was paying attention. The light shifted from sterile to amber, human. Provisional, said the room, and the lens went dark. The corridor did not like what I did next, or rather, the system that sat behind it, watching with a fondness it would never admit, threw me a test. An alarm began in the bones of the place, the kind you don't hear until you do. The hall stretched, clenched, introduced dead ends where there had been doors, doors where there had been clean wall. Someone, somewhere, labeled me unauthorized. It was a fair label. It was also inadequate. Panic is loud, so I listened for something quieter. The doors didn't open on words alone. They pulsed, there, then not, on a rhythm that felt like a heartbeat pretending to be a metronome. 7, 5, 3. Not symmetrical, not even. Human. My grandmother used to calm me with a lullaby that walked down those numbers without counting, just felt. I clapped softly, palm to palm, the way you do in echoey rooms to find their size. 7 beats, pause. 5, pause. 3. On the 3, a seam shimmered, as if embarrassed at being seen. I stepped through as the wall decided to become a door 1 second too late. Humans practice what others pray, someone whispered, and I realized it was me, that I had become the kind of person who says out loud what rooms are thinking. The central vault sat like the idea of a nest. It wasn't grand, it was precise. The handprint scanner beside it was shaped wrong for me, 3 long digits, 2 shorter, placed like a creature designed from a hexagonal thought. I placed my palm there anyway, because I am sometimes rude and often hopeful. The metal was cool. The scanner would have rejected me, should have, except that I was thinking about mercy. And you can laugh at me for naming it, but it's true. The word in the hall softened when I did, and the scanner softened too, accepting, evaluating, allowing. The vault opened on a gust of cold like a careful breath before speaking a secret. The room smelled like old paper and clean electricity. On the table, dossiers labeled in a language that had learned to speak to me when photographed. I raised my camera. In the screen, the titles were legible: Earth, Provisional Class K, Mythsmith Incidents, Containment Successors. Class K. My mouth wanted to make a joke about kindergarten. My hands were steady the way they are when I'm doing something I'll have to explain to a future that might not forgive me. I paged through. Some sections were redacted with the confidence of institutions, the black bars neat as well-kept graves. But you can read erasures, too, if you understand the way paper fibers tear and indent when the hand that blacked them out pressed harder on the word it feared. I angled the pages under light. I let the shadows tell me where the pen had hesitated. I didn't get everything. I got enough. Humans, according to the file, interface cleanly because our emotions apply vector pressure, a phrase that made me grin and want to pick a fight with a physicist, in ways the archive can translate into safe overrides. Other species either fixate, crash onto a single word like faith or purity until the system locks to prevent damage, or dissolve, losing their edges and reverence. We practice, we rehearse, we make do, we adjust. The archive, designed by a doctrine that prefers binaries, doesn't know what to do with rehearsal except respect it.
Notes on Myth-Smith incidents read like bedtime stories told to keep children from picking doors that bite. A family line in 1913 that kept a town from flooding by convincing a bridge to hum a different note. A choir in 1968 that learned a lock's chord and sang a checkpoint open to move people to safety during a fire. A librarian in 2002 who found a door like mine and sealed it because the town wasn't ready. The embassy seal appeared again at the corner of my camera, and this time it didn't blink away. A live feed toggled on in the upper right of the room, a symbol rather than a face. A voice, filtered and formal, said, "Cease access, prepare to exit, permanent seal in T-60. A countdown began at the edge of the vault, reluctance hidden under authority. I have never been good with ultimatums.
It would have been neat to have exactly two options. Seal the archive, be the hero who says no to power. Accept custodianship, be the fool who says yes to a door that changes reality. I stared at the countdown as it ticked, and the door hummed its 753, and I thought about all the ways we have learned to be careful with dangerous things. Fire, knives, words. What if neither? I said, not to the voice that said seal, not to the vault that said stay, but to the part of me that has always refused traps disguised as choices. I proposed a third, not a person as custodian, a chorus, a door that only opens when three human emotions align: regret to remember consequences, mercy to prevent cruelty, doubt to keep power humble. A commons key, a pressure that no one person's mood can counterfeit. I sketched it, fast and messy, on the vault table. 3 interlocking sigils, spiral, hand, a question mark turned into a torch. I spoke it aloud because rooms listen when you're brave enough to be specific. The system hesitated. I could feel the doctrine behind it recalculating whether improvisation counts as law and deciding, slowly, painfully, that sometimes it has to if it wants to survive contact with us. The subtitles that didn't exist here wrote themselves in my head. Protocol variant, human, collective key recognized. The corridor lights shifted from amber to a warm white that felt like a kitchen at midnight when everyone who matters is home and too tired to pretend. The countdown paused, then resumed, but not toward 0, toward a new word: standby. Outside, through a feed I did not grant permission for, but was grateful existed, I saw the street in front of the building. People stopped. Just for a breath, they paused mid-step, mid-sentence, mid-scroll, as if they had all heard the same 3-note chord and were trying to remember where they learned it. The pause wasn't fear, it was attention. You cannot govern attention. You can invite it. The embassy voice spoke, less like a gavel, more like a teacher who has chosen to respect a student without becoming smaller. Custodianship, conditional, public protocol, ledger required, breach equals seal. Deal, I said, because I've made worse bargains for coffee. The vault closed gently. The hall settled. The word mercy on the nearest door looked different, though I suspect that was me. When I stepped back into the basement, the wall was brick again. Paint flaked down the way it does when humidity disrespects maintenance. If I hadn't known where to look, I would have missed it. A small brass sigil at ankle height, mine interlaced with the spiral, set like a signature on a painting that refuses to be about its painter. The municipal app, our city's clunky pride, had a new department listed by morning: civic custodianship. No director, no mission statement, just a public ledger icon and a note: protocol in draft. I poured coffee and laughed because bureaucracy is magic in slow motion. I returned the pendant. I filmed it, my voice steady because crying would have made it about me, and I have promised myself I will only make it about me when I need to save my life. The pendant cooled in my palm. The room accepted the apology in the only language that matters here: action. We built a protocol, transparent, uncomfortable, alive. 3 key teams, rotating, public names, ledger entries made visible to anyone who wants to question them. Moratorium on personal gain. If you try to fix your own life with a door like this, the door will fix you back, and you won't like the symmetry. Our first test wasn't glamorous. It was a bridge that hummed wrong in high wind, a resonance our budget couldn't address for another 2 years. We didn't edit the bridge, we edited the way the wind met it, a microshift, a degree of humility taught to air. Nobody noticed, which is the best compliment safety ever gets. I didn't unlock a door. I agreed to hold it steady while we learned to deserve it. The last box I sealed that night had a label I didn't write: Inquiry. My hand hovered. The notification on my phone pinged, just once, with a tone our team has learned to respect. Chapter Inquiry has a new question. I looked at the thumbnail, in outline, not human, not hostile, a silhouette of someone who has waited a long time to be invited to a table where the rules changed without asking them. I set the box down. I turned on the camera. I hit record. I'm listening, I said, and for once it felt like the beginning of an answer, not the end of a story.
If this door found you, you're probably the kind of person who holds the line when it trembles. The ledger is live. The protocol is public. In the comments, name your 3-key team. Who brings regret? Who carries mercy? Who defends doubt? And the first civic fix you'd vote for. I'll see you in the next video. Bring a pencil. Doors like honesty.